Please welcome to the stage your host for Grace Hopper Celebration, Jean Sparrow.
Good morning. Look at my early risers. Thank you so much. I feel like y'all are so far away. I appreciate y'all for showing up today. How we doing? Day 3. I don't know about you guys, but my feet hurt. That's why I got my sneakers on today because listen, we put in a lot of miles and a lot of steps out there in these halls of McCormick Place. But it is a joy. Over the past couple of days, we have sparked lots of conversations, forged lots of connections. I hope things are still going well for you out there. And we've also pushed our boundaries. So today, we are going to lean into the idea of Unbound by tackling one of tech's biggest challenges, building a talent pipeline that is inclusive, resilient, and also future ready. So our next session is called Redesigning the Tech Talent Pipeline, sponsored by Western Governors University, and it's exploring that very question. I'm honored to introduce Linda Calvin, who brings more than 20 years of experience in IT and digital leadership to today's conversation. Her global tech experience has equipped her with an understanding of cultural nuances. She currently serves as Vice President of IT at Ivy Tech Community College and plays leadership roles in equity and tech inclusion initiatives, including serving on the board of the Indiana Technology and Innovation Association. She is joined by our moderator, Megan Stevens, Director of Programs for AnitaB.org, who knows a thing or two about the importance of linking strategy to people and partnerships. With 15 years of experience leading nonprofit and program management, business development, and community engagement, Megan is all about positive impact. So let's sit back and soak in the wisdom around our future workforce. Welcome to Megan and Linda. Thank you.
This girl is on fire.
I love this song.
I love this song too. Welcome everyone. Today we're going to dive into a conversation about how women shape tech, not just entering it, but leading it. We're going to explore education, access, leadership, and how AI is changing the game. But I want to start with a grounding question for my fellow Hoosier here. You've worked across diverse settings and cultures. What have you seen help tech truly thrive in those environments, and what gets in the way?
You know, what I've noticed and first of all, to everyone who's here, when she says go Hoosiers, we both are from Indianapolis, so what's up with
right.
that? So what I would say is for tech to thrive, you need, what I've seen is number one, an embrace of lived experience and diversity of thought, right? And just diversity in general. Because we know that you make more money, you have better products when you have more diverse teams. So really when I've seen tech thrive, it's because you have a leader who welcomes you into the space, who really wants you to be part of a team and contribute. You know, I find it amusing when we're asked to fit in because you hired me for my spark and for what makes me very unique, right? And that's what makes tech thrive, is those unique lived experiences and knowledge and energy for great products. But what gets in the way is the stereotype. What gets in the way is the bias. What gets in the way is we want you to fit into the box. So first we hire you because you're awesome, but then we say, but we need you to fit in and do this, right? And that's what gets in the way of tech, is in having that thriving, is that bias. If you have a leader who's not engaged, who's not paying attention to what's happening in their teams, that is essential. Who's not encouraging the voices to be heard. You know, I think I made a comment last week to someone that leadership is personal. We should take that personally. And you know, I know there's the idea that, well, hey, these are adults and I'm a leader. So that's what adults do. They should be adulting. And majority of what you're doing as a leader is managing people to deliver the innovation and solutions. So that leader needs to be engaged and involved to say, hey, I'm noticing that someone's not contributing all this beautiful magic that they have. I am going to make sure that they're invited and encouraged to be part of that. And, when you don't have that, that's when it gets in the way.
And really, it's mutually advantageous for the company as well, right? When you foster the talents and the ability of your staff and your team, you welcoming their brilliance, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's advantageous for you as an organization and as a leader. I want to talk about education, and not just as a credential, but truly as a tool for leadership and access. There's often a lot of talk about many pathways into tech. But when it comes to women, specifically women of color, why do degrees still matter? And especially when we see statistics such as women make up 47% of the US workforce, right? But only 18% of the US cybersecurity workforce is comprised of women.
So, this is what I would say is, number one, we also know that by age 35, 50% of women are leaving tech, right? So I believe there is a big push for skills first, right? Skills first initiative and skills and leveraging skills. And that's great because skills actually empower economic mobility. And we want that, and we especially want that for those families that don't have degrees, right? The work that 110 Coalition was doing years ago.
Right.
For those families that don't have degrees, that don't have access, we want to emphasize that. But I can tell you that my fear in having only that message and downplaying the importance of a degree is that we create a tech underclass. So you can only get so far, right? And then you hit the ceiling. And I will use me as a primary example. I started my career back in the day, right?
Yeah.
I said last night I carbon date myself.
Yeah.
But back in the day, we'll just say it was before 1990.
Okay.
And I didn't have a degree. And so I started learning and growing my skills in VAX VMS and other systems that people have never heard of. And I was doing great. And then I went to a company called Dow Elanco, Dow Chemical, and Eli Lilly. And I was thriving there, but I was hitting a ceiling because I didn't have a degree. So I could not move into management. I could not move into leadership, and I couldn't have that influence. But as soon as I started, and I knew I was going to go back to school, I was just waiting for that year to tick away so I could take advantage of tuition assistance, right? And so I earned my degree, and that opened doors for me to get into leadership. But the other thing that was really important, Megan, is education fundamentally changes you as a human being. I am a different leader. I am a different woman. I'm a different wife, a different sister, a different friend due to education, because it's not just teaching you the skills to smash code or the skills to build things. It's also teaching you a different way to think through problems, right? You analyze differently, but you also open up your entire world to all of these different people, and that's why education needs to be and should be considered essential, especially for women and people of color, because as you ascend, you are going to hit that. Now, again, we know that we are moving to a place where it's going to be mostly an emphasis on skills, right? And what you can come out of with AI. But it is the foundation of education that gives you the leg up.
Yeah. We're going to talk about AI in a little bit, but in the conversations that we've had together, you've said education helps combat fear. And you talk about this leg up. So can you unpack what kind of fear you are speaking about and how education combats that, right? And when we look at this ceiling you were just referring to, what does access to proper education, how does it shift or break that ceiling?
So, first from a fear perspective, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, I think it combats fear in the sense that, you know, well, I think misery loves company and everybody gets afraid when they go to school,
Yeah.
right? Because you're in a new space, there are new people, there are new ways of thinking. And so I think when we're all together, we feel a camaraderie, if you will, because you're scared too, right? But I think the other thing it is that education allows you to explore different ways of thinking to where you can combat fear because you're sitting next to someone and you're going to learn from them and they are going to learn from you and you're going to become more comfortable with the fact that hey, you're encouraged to think about a problem differently than the person sitting next to you. So I think that's how it combats fear, but it also again going back to who you get to meet when you're in school, who you get to belong, the clubs you get to belong to, that just, it just really changes how you feel in rooms and how you feel about yourself. And you know, I think the other thing is too, as far as fear goes, and this is my little sensitive point, is I have a lot of young women that I mentor and speak with in college, and they will always talk to me about imposter syndrome. And I'm like, look, here's the thing. We need to quit implying that everyone, especially women and people of color, that we're all broken, right? And then we have imposter syndrome. It is perfectly normal and natural to be afraid when you're doing something new. That's called the human experience. So you get out there, you wade into it, and you take your chances. But it's normal to be fearful. And so I think that that's where we have to flip the script. And that's where education can help, is that, hey, you know what? It's okay to be afraid of new things. You just try them. And if you fail, you get up, you shake it off, and you move on. You could do that. But I think also, you know, when you think about the access to education, the unfortunate thing is that we we live in a space and we have people who haven't been they maybe they've graduated and they've been out of educate the space for a while, right? And then they see all the commercials and they want to have a tech career. And it is harder. It is harder after all that time. But you know what? I think organizations, and I'm going to say WGU in the house, make that easier for you. Make that easier for you because it's competency-based education and it meets you where you're at. And that's what's really important is in order to get over that fear and to provide that access, you need to meet people where they're at. So that means when you're working a full-time job or two, because we have some people who are working two jobs just to make ends meet. Yes. But then you can do education at your own at your own pace, and you can get what you need to get started. So I think that's what I get really excited about is the access to education and just how it can just fundamentally change your life. And I'll say this last thing, you know, we talk about, hey, we're going to get rich, right? Yeah. Okay, there are some people who do tech and get rich. And I think by definition, maybe we all probably are rich in our own ways, right? But, you know, when you get your first job out of tech, you may be making $65,000, $70,000 a year. And people say, well, that's not rich. And it's like, yeah, but you get to work one job. You get to have access to 401ks. You get to have access to health plans. You get to have all of that for that job. That education has opened the door for you to get. And that helps you, and that helps for people of color to narrow that wealth gap and that access to wealth gap, but also to continue to pursue education and to evolve in tech. So that's why I just really excited about education. Well, you asked the right question, girl, because I just get really excited about it.
Well, you hit on something that I think is incredibly important in the piece of access, but when proper education, that not only impacts that individual, that's a micro level of impact because now it impacts their community, which in turn impacts the economy, right? And you talk about impacting their family from a generational wealth development. That is incredible. Quick anecdote, in another program, in another life, I worked with a young lady, she was a teenage mother, and she got her first tech job, and I called her to check in on her, and she says, Megan, I think they made a mistake on my paycheck. And I said, well, why? And she said, I've never seen this much money ever at one time. And I said, no, that's your new reality. She was able to buy a house. She was able to provide, right, a different level of provision for her family, and that is so essential. Another thing you called out that is important, we talked about statistically women leaving tech by the age of 35. How does mentorship or a lack thereof play a role in that? And then what are some of the resources available at WGU that you all are implementing for your women in your technology programs?
So, when Accenture and Girls Who Code did that research in 2019, and they said by age 35, 50% of women are leaving due to lack of mentors, lack of role models, and then just the same kind of, I'm going to speak over you, fetch the coffee, take the notes, right? But mentorship is essential because, first of all, when you look up, you want to see people who look like you, right? And when you look up and you see people who look like you, that means you can do that. It means that you can be that. You can have access to that. So when you see us, you can be us, right? But from a mentorship perspective, that's what's essential. And actually, just recently, there's an author came out with a school called Dream School, Jeff Salingo. And he talked about the emphasis of there are two things very, very important for college students: belonging and mentorship. And when you have a mentor when you're feeling low, so think about, how hard, and especially when you're working full time and you have classes, right? It's really hard, and sometimes you feel scared, bummed, tired. I know I earned both of my degrees while going to school. And, I had someone I could reach out to and talk to when I was feeling very low. And it was like, you know what, I want to quit. I would drive home and it's 9 o'clock at night. I haven't been home since I left the house at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed with law school, things that I have to do plus work. And I'm crying. And, having that mentor, having someone that's wind beneath your wings, right, to cheer you on, to encourage you, that is essential. I call it having a personal board of directors. So we should all have mentors, someone we can talk to when we need cheering up, when we need to check ourselves a little bit, right? I think that's what keeps people going. And so at WGU, all students have mentors.
Nice.
And those mentors follow up with them to say, hey, how is this going? Are you having a challenge in your class? I was mentoring a young woman, and her mentor would check in with her and go, how's it going with this class? What do we need to do to help you? Do we need to get you in touch with the instructor? But also at WGU, we have Women in Cybersecurity, Women in Tech Club, and also Reboot Representation. When I was there, before I joined WGU, we funded B4 Women in Tech, an organization encouraging Black, Latina, Native American women to stay with tech, to pursue those tech degrees. So that's what is essential for anything that we do. And anyone is out there who's hearing this, if you don't have a mentor, that should be the first number one thing that you do before you leave, is meet 3 people and define a mentor. Start building your personal board of directors, because those people are going to help you stay the course as things get hard in your educational and your tech journey.
The thing about mentorship relationships, again, it's that bidirectional impact. A really good mentor often learns something for their mentee, right? It enhances their perspective, and helps them navigate future relationships differently, right? And so again, they are essential, and that's why we have things like Brain Date, that's set up there, and different opportunities. The Need to Be community, we have a major mentorship program because we understand how essential it is to combat that lack of access and getting to climbing that ladder. And so you talked about representation in your last response a little bit. So let's dig a little deeper and talk about not who's in the room, but actually who's leading the conversations. So since 2020, the School of Technology at WGU has experienced immense growth, right? 138% female enrollment growth, that's huge, and then 264% enrollment growth in the Black, Latina, and Native women's population. When you're building programs or panels and just different things, why is it so essential to include practitioners? And I want to be very specific here that look like your target audience in those stats we just shared.
Ooh, that is close to me. So, um, when you're on stage, and well, first of all, here's the challenge that I've seen in the past. Number one is it's great to hear from recruiters, and we need that, right? We need to hear from the IT recruiters. We want to hear from the HR leaders. We want to hear from those people about how we get into processes and understanding how we get into the doors, right, at organizations. But we need, if you're going to pursue a career in tech, you want to see someone who's doing tech on a panel. And that's where I have seen in the past just a deficit of, I want to see a cloud architect,
Yeah.
right? I want to see someone who's a data scientist. I want to see someone who's a Python Jedi. I want to see someone who's smashed code, who's walked in that. That's how you learn, is then you're leaning in to say, oh my gosh, that person's learned this. They've taken this. This is what I need to do. This is how I need to pivot, right? So that's why you need practitioners. But then, just like I said earlier, when you see us, you can be us. And when you are seeing women, when you're seeing Black, Latina, Native American women, when you're seeing people on the stage, then that lets you know that you can do that someone else is doing that, someone else is thriving. I mean, we're here, we lift while we rise, right?
That's right.
But we're also, I think of it as a machete of sorts, where we're cutting down the pathways so some people can follow us. So that's why it is just so incredibly important that when you're, and if you are going to go back and you're going to have a panel or a program, then what you need to do is make sure, if you have your recruiter on that panel, that's great. But make sure that you have a practitioner on your panel, someone who's going to speak to you. Because the other thing here is we need to see, if we see only one demographic or one gender, do we want to stay the course? You know, the one thing, I love Big Bang Theory. Megan, that was one of my favorite shows.
Okay.
But talk about the stereotype. It was just the dudes, and then you had the goofy blonde woman, right? The little blonde woman, Bernadette, who would speak in the little squeaky voice, and the geeky other woman. There were no black women. If you remember, the only black woman in Big Bang Theory was the HR person. Right?
Right on
Talk about
brand.
stereotype.
Yes.
But I mean, we need to be able to see people who look like us so we know there's space for us.
Yeah.
Right? And that means on panels, in boardrooms, in Zoom rooms, in Teams chats.
Breaking the stereotype. One of the things, our focus at Anita B and our mission is we want to get people in our community skilled, hired, promoted, paid, and funded. And the goal here is we want them to thrive, right? And lead and drive that innovation to lead to an equitable and sustainable future. And I think that's why this partnership with Anita B and WGU works so well, because we have similar objectives and what we are, trying to achieve. We've had a lot of conversations. We have, being both from Indianapolis, we have mutual, a lot of folks in our network, and we had a conversation one time, and you spoke about the concept of oftentimes women are told, keep your head down, right? And you want to challenge that thought, but what does that look like in practice, and how can we help each other in tech with it?
Okay, well, I think a lot of people have heard this, but a lot of women have heard this. Well, just work hard and keep your head down.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I have a mohawk, so my head is not going to be down. The hair is going to be high. But, here's the thing. I want to retire that phrase. Work hard, yes, absolutely. Keep your head down, no. We need to see each other. And that means I need to look up and see Megan and high five you.
That's right.
Because when I'm struggling if I'm struggling in let's say, for example, if I'm struggling in a math class and I'm a student, I get to look up and I get to see you, and you get to inspire me, and I get to ask you for help, right? I look up and I see a mentor there who is there like, Linda, you can do this, you can go, you can keep moving. Yeah, are you having a challenge? I mean, I was on stage with a woman just a couple of weeks ago. Her name is Nyla. She's a student at WGU. And her mentor, okay, first of all, it's the first time I cried on stage. And it was like, I do not cry on stage. But then the tears started, and I was like, oh, Lord, the tears are coming. I hope I don't have raccoon eyes. But but her mentor was talking to her. She had a challenge, and her mentor reached out to her. And you got to look up and see someone who was there supporting you and helping you. And so that's why it is essential that we are retiring that phrase to keep your head down. No, look up. We should all be looking at each other for inspiration, for advice, for counsel, for role modeling. That's why the next person who says that to me, I'm gonna be like, ooh, are you pressing my buttons? Because we are not gonna say that anymore. Look up, high five. That's what we do.
That's right. And again, especially as certain demographics, as you climb that ladder, right? The number of people that you see that look like you, it gets smaller and smaller and
Does.
smaller. And it goes back to that concept of imposter syndrome. Because am I really supposed to be here? How did I get here? Was this luck? Did they just hire me because of what I look like? And then that in turn impacts your confidence, right? And then you now begin to fulfill, well, is she really supposed to be here? And so that representation of looking up to see someone who looks like you is incredibly important. So we talked about AI, you mentioned it for a second. So let's dive deep here. And I want to talk about AI though, not just as a tool, but we're inundated with conversations about it. So let's talk about it and look at it from a movement. Before you know, I think your ideology is looking at it, AI specifically, more from encouragement to engagement, but what can our involvement as women look like, right? Moving beyond just the surface level. You know, we have a lot of AI women leaders, but what does our impact and engagement look like for it?
Well, I mean, I think number one is you don't have a robust product if you only have one at a table,
Yes.
right? So women have to be involved and engaged because we need to be at the table shaping those decisions being made for AI. As an example, there was a study done, I think it was just this past year, where it showed that that ChatGPT were encouraged to ask for less money for a job than men were. And that was ChatGPT. So we need to be engaged and involved to flip that, right? Now, there's a whole host of things, you know, if you're building, and Bo Lee brought this up the other day, if you're building on a large language model that already has the bias in it, and then you adopt it, man, that's going to be a lot of work. You need to get in there and get under for the data. But we need to be engaged and involved from a standpoint of having those conversations about how we shape AI in the future. We need to be encouraging each other to be engaged and involved and lean in. So there are less women using AI than there are men. And we need to flip that. Why is that? Because the future, I mean, if we think about, I liken AI to what happened with the internet back in the day, right? It fundamentally changed how we try. I mean, think about it. We're thinking about now, we're looking at our apps. Are we going to be able to get on a plane tomorrow? Because they're about to cut 10% of flights, right? So, I mean, it infiltrates every part of our lives. So, women need to be a part of that. We need to shape that. And that means we need to go to events. We need to show up on stage. We need to lean in and learn. We need to be part of conversations. We need to be just playing with it. I play with Midjourney a lot. I play with ChatGPT a lot. I use it, but I also play with it just to explore. So that's where we really need to be engaged and involved, is we need to just embrace it wholly and completely.
How does that close the gap as far as leadership and access?
So how it closes the gap is the one thing that we do know, and at WGU we've heard this from employers, is that they are now hiring, and hiring has taken a switch where they're looking for more people who actually have the skills. So it's no longer that, hey, you're going to come out, you're going to graduate from college, and we're going to teach you whatever skills and augment whatever you've learned in college. No, what we're hearing is we need to hire you, and you need to have applicable, durable skills. You need to know how to use these tools, right? That's how it narrows that gap to leadership. Because if we're learning now, that means when, especially for students, when they're graduating, they're coming out and they're ready. Right? For women who are already in the tech ecosystem, what it means for us is that we could sit down and we can talk to leaders and say, this is what we recommend. We recommend adopting AI for this reason. We recommend that this is a problem and we have a solution. That's how it narrows the gap, right? I mean, there was an example a while ago, Megan, I read about, and I can't remember exactly the product, but it was a women's menopause app. And it was 3 men who were leading it. Now listen, there's not, hey, no tea, no shade, gentlemen. My husband has learned about menopause, he has. But here's the thing, no, that's what we go through. Why aren't we at that table? But that's exactly what's gonna happen if we don't lean in to say, what problems can we solve with AI? And that's what we should all be leaving with is, there is a problem, what is something that keeps you up at night, and how can you leverage AI to solve that problem, and then lean in and lead it.
If there was a path, and we're looking at if we want women to lead in AI, so where exactly should they start? And I also want to talk about this from combating with fear, right? We had a conversation of women are not using it because I'm kind of afraid of it. And so how do we combat that? Do they start with education? Is it experimentation, joining the right conversations? What does that path look like? And then what is WGU doing to leverage their relationships and partnerships to build that pathway?
So yes to all of those things.
Okay.
So yes, it is education. If you are already working in the tech ecosystem, then what my advice to you, if you're not doing already, is number one, you need to explore what's out there. So, again, WGU, we have an academy where we have a certificate where you can upskill from an AI perspective, but also incorporating that into our curriculum, not only offering AI engineering, not only offering data, but also introducing it throughout curriculum, because it's not just, here's the thing, it's not just tech anymore. Yeah. AI impacts every single area. Even if you're an English lit major, you should come out and have AI skills or understand how to leverage it and how to use it, right? So number one, that's the education, and that's a pathway. The other thing is experimentation. Go play with it. Is it Perplexity? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Gemini? Is it Claude? Is it Chatbox AI? You want to learn prompt engineering? There's a course. There, you know what? There's an app for that, right? So it's education, it's experimentation, it's participating in a hackathon. So there is a young woman who's here, her name is Kushbu, and I heard her speak at an Indiana Women in Tech Week event. And she talked about how she joined a hackathon as a cloud architect and what it exposed her to. Number one, it exposes you to the stress of being under pressure. But here's the most important thing is you can't break anything. You're not in production, right? So you get this great opportunity to play with something and use it. And, a lot of people say, well, I'm afraid to go to a hackathon because I don't want to not be the smartest person in the room. Well, trust me. There are going to be very few places where you're always the smartest person in the room. You have something to offer. Again, going back to what's your spark? What's your superpower? What do you love to do? And then you contribute that. And I think that will help you get over the fear, is participating in an AI hackathon. You may think, I don't know a thing. You know more than you think you know, right? And what you don't know, you will learn from someone else, and they will learn in turn from you,
That's right.
right? So I think that's really what we need to do is that if you start exposing yourself and putting yourself out there, you will get over it. And I want to share this with you. There was a young woman um, before I came to WGU and I worked at Ivy Tech. She said, you know, I was a first semester student getting my associate's degree at Ivy Tech in software development, and I didn't feel like I knew anything. And she said, so I wasn't going to go to this hackathon, and it was in hackathon sponsored by AT&T, and I wasn't going to go. She said, because I didn't know anything. She said, but I went because my friend encouraged me. And number one, she said, I had a great time. I learned a lot, which then I took back to help me become a better technologist. But also, she was in a team and they proposed something and they won. And then they took that and they kept expanding it and going. And then they took it to a Notre Dame competition. And the last I heard, they were rolling it out to health institutions in the state of Indiana. That's what leaning in, that's what you can do with AI to get over that fear, is just try it. The worst thing that can happen, what's the worst thing that can happen is you may not win the pot, but you will always learn something. And that's what's really important, is that you learn something. And that means unlocking the door to education and trying things and belonging to clubs, women in AI, women in data science, going to events and becoming part of those things to open up your education and your mind to new things.
For companies that, again, we've been talking about this all week, the concept of that notion of AI will replace the workforce. And I think we've challenged that a little bit this week. When we're looking at education and upskilling people, how does AI fit into that? But I want to talk about it from the lens of from a corporate perspective and upskilling a workforce, right? So is that micro learning? How can companies do that to prepare their workforce for the next level, not to be replaced, but for them to enhance their own skills?
Right, and we do know, and there's been a lot of discussion that, you know, we see the narrative in the media that AI's taken all the jobs, right? Okay, so here's what we do know. If you do not have AI skills, then you can be replaced and will be replaced. So I think what organizations need to do for a competitive advantage and is to be very strategic in planning how do we forge relationships with education partners. So that means, hey, we are going to provide our employees opportunities to pursue a credential in AI. What does that look like? To have access to actual formal education. I think that's essential. There are boot camps and other things you can do, and nothing wrong with that. But I think what companies need to do is be strategic and be serious and say, who are our partners out here that we can have our employees go and they can get the education they need and we can work with them to see what that looks like, right, from an AI perspective. And then there is microlearning, and that's stretch assignments. So what is it that you think you want to do? And there are a lot of companies that are just kind of adopting AI without being really strategic and thoughtful, right? But what things can you do? Boil the ocean, right, for great ideas, and then give employees stretch assignments so they're learning, right? Create those organizations within your company to help you belong to AI innovative learning. So I will tell you, when I was at Dow Elanco way back in the day, it became Dow AgriSciences and now it's Corteva. When I was there, the internet exploded. And we're talking early days where you had the dancing, I think they had the dancing things you would see on all the websites. And, it wasn't sexy back then, right? But I had an opportunity, and the company formed an internet user council. And they said, hey, we're going to explore this internet, the internets, and who wants to become engaged and involved? And so I signed up. I was like, oh, I want to learn more about it. So they had speakers come in. We read books. We practiced. I used Front Page. Ooh, Microsoft Front Page and Dreamweaver. But I learned that early because the company created an environment for me to learn in, right? And so I think organizations need to do the same thing. What are you doing to encourage employees to come and break down those barriers, and everyone, not just your tech employees, but everyone to come in and be engaged and involved and learn more about, number one, this is what the company wants to do from an AI perspective. Here are the opportunities for you to upskill and learn, but also here are some really cool things the company is doing that you can learn from, and then give you a foundation of AI, right? Because everybody assumes that everybody knows everything about AI, and that's not true. I bet you there's some leaders that probably couldn't tell you LLM and what that stands for, right? Or talk about neural networks, or the importance of data cleansing, right? So let's do some foundational training as well. And as an organization, if you can't do it, then there are partners like WGU as an example that can provide that learning for you. But that's what I think that companies really need to do, is to be thoughtful and strategic to upskill their workforce. Because here's the thing, if you don't, then you will be left behind.
Yeah.
Period, end of story. We already know that.
Yeah. We talk about this often inside of Anita B about having as many people at the table build the tech that everyone is going to use. And because we see how powerful and impactful and palpable that is. And with that mindset, I want to take a look at, as we close out here, with the look forward. What's the vision? What's the action, right, for folks that are here? So if you could redesign how we prepare women in tech, specifically looking at leadership, from education to mentorship, we've talked about sponsorship, what would you change first?
The first thing I would change is, I believe that in Indiana, during Indiana Women in Tech Week, I hosted a summit called the Female Tectonic. And the first thing I did was, we're going to bring women together for that mentorship. So, number one, we're going to hear about onboarding. We're going to hear from a woman who's working in tech about onboarding, about tech stacks, about all of that. One. Number two, then it was women working together. My favorite question to ask people is, what are 3 things to keep you up at night? If you're in a new job, if you're with new people, if you're trying to build your personal board of directors, ask that question, what are 3 things that keep you up at night? And we did an exercise where women came together at tables and they worked together. Number one, because they can learn from each other. Number two, they were able to find mentors. And then the afternoon part of the session was kicked off with how to be entrepreneurs. Women sometimes, because maybe you're raising kids, you're doing all the things, and now you want me to give up the job where I feel safe.
Yeah.
To go do something on my own. So we had someone come in and talk about, hey, this is how you get started. But then one of the other most important things was, we need leaders to understand what's happening. So the research is the research. The data tells the story and does not lie. So what needs to happen is, we need leaders to really lean in and go, what's happening in my organization? Do I have situations where the women in my organization aren't being appreciated in meetings, where they're not given their voice, where they're being spoken over? So I really want leaders to understand, this is how I create a culture of innovation. And I know that we're not supposed to say those 3 letters, right? But a culture of innovation, and how you start creating a culture of innovation is making everyone feel as though their lived experience, their knowledge, they belong and are welcome. And so I think that's the great way. And also, let's have some more women on the stage. Let's have some more women in the boardroom. Let's have some more women in the Zoom rooms, because when you see us, you can be us. And that's how we narrow that gap and create more opportunities for women. Give stretch assignments. Organizations should be giving and saying, hey, let's give some stretch assignments out to people. But that's what I think that we change. And that's where we start.
I love a good curated conversation, right?
I got it. I got
Everything,
the
all the
process.
concepts we're linking. We're talking about accessibility.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what you spoke about, and I think in your first response, when you allow people to innovate, how beneficial that is for everyone. And so, one more question for you, Linda, is what's one thing you wish more people understood about the journey of women in tech? And how can when they leave Grace Hopper Celebration and they go back to their separate spaces, they go back to their teams, to their workforces, what's the one thing that they should do better?
Just one thing?
Just give them one. Make it easy, one.
Because I have like 5.
I know. Give them the one.
You know, I think I'm going to say connection. So the one thing that we can all do is be better at connection. And that means reach out to someone on LinkedIn who inspires you, who you think is cool, who you've heard others speak about. Reach out to someone on LinkedIn and say, hey, I call it the "Hi, I'm Linda" thing. Hi, I'm Linda. And some of you may have received that message. Hi, I'm Linda. I'm not here to sell anything. I just want to learn from you. And so I think it's that connection. Or, hi, I need a mentor. Can I talk with you? I am looking to explore a career in AI or in cloud or wherever. How can I talk with you? Or as a leader, hello, Linda. You know what? You and I have never had any conversation. Let's get together and talk. I want you to be up front with me, right? So I think it's connection is what we can all do to make it better. And that means connecting with one another. It means connecting with that resource, with that pathway, connection.
Linda, I want to thank you so much for an amazing conversation, my fellow Hoosier and Go Indy. Thank you, Linda, again. And we have so many directives of, again, what you can do to go back into your workforces, to expand access to education, and to ultimately make it easier for women to thrive in tech. Thank you, Linda.
This girl is on fire.
Yes. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you so much, Linda. That was a great conversation. A lot of things to take away from that. When we let go of the perceptions we have about talent and the journey of women in tech, we free ourselves from so many constraints and become unbound in building the talented teams around us. Now it's time for a little 30-minute break, so share your experiences at #GHC25. Make sure you visit the bookshop. I will be there later this afternoon, but go over there, have a chat with somebody you haven't met. Pay attention to what Linda and Megan shared with you. It's so essential. We will see you right here at 10:15 for our next session on banking for good with Capital One.
That we're fine with this. We didn't come for money, but every song's like gold teeth, gray goose dripping in the bathroom, bloodstains, ball gowns, trash in the hotel room. We don't care. We're driving Cadillacs.